December 7, 1941, dawned like any other day in Hawaii. The sun rose over Pearl Harbor, illuminating the U.S. Pacific Fleet at anchor. Sailors and civilians alike went about their morning routines. No one suspected the looming danger. In a matter of hours, this peaceful Sunday would become one of the most infamous days in American history. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a pivotal moment in World War II. It thrust the United States into a global conflict it had long sought to avoid. The Japanese strike was swift, devastating, and meticulously planned. It caught the American forces completely off guard. The assault would forever change the course of the war and shape the future of international relations. President Franklin D. Roosevelt called it a date which will live in infamy. His words rang true. The attack galvanized American public opinion. It united a nation that had been divided over entering the war. Pearl Harbor became a rallying cry, a symbol of American resilience in the face of adversity. The attack on Pearl Harbor didn't occur in a vacuum. It was the culmination of years of escalating tensions between Japan and the United States. In the 1930s, Japan embarked on an aggressive expansion in Asia. They invaded Manchuria in 1931 and launched a full-scale war against China in 1937. These actions alarmed the United States and other Western powers. The US responded with economic sanctions against Japan. In 1940, America imposed an embargo on aircraft exports to Japan. Later, it expanded to include scrap iron and steel. The most significant blow came in July 1941. The US froze Japanese assets and imposed an oil embargo. This was a critical issue for resource-poor Japan, which relied heavily on imported oil. Japan faced a difficult choice. They could either withdraw from China and other occupied territories or secure new sources of raw materials. The Japanese military leadership chose the latter. They set their sights on the resource-rich territories of Southeast Asia. However, they knew that such a move would likely provoke war with the United States. Diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis continued throughout 1941, but neither side was willing to compromise on core issues. As the year progressed, war seemed increasingly inevitable. The idea for an attack on Pearl Harbor came from Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. He was the commander-in-chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet. Yamamoto knew that Japan couldn't win a prolonged war against the United States. He hoped a knockout blow at Pearl Harbor would demoralize America. His goal was to destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet and force a quick negotiated settlement. Planning for the attack began in early 1941. The Japanese faced significant challenges. Pearl Harbor was shallow, making torpedo attacks difficult. It was also far from Japan, stretching the limits of their naval capabilities. To overcome these obstacles, they developed shallow-running torpedoes. They also modified their aircraft for long-range flights. The Japanese planners paid meticulous attention to detail. They gathered intelligence on Pearl Harbor's defenses. They studied the routines of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The attack force trained relentlessly, perfecting their tactics and timing. Secrecy was paramount. Only a handful of Japan's top leaders knew the full scope of the plan. The attack force sailed from Japan on November 26, 1941. At 6 a.m. on December 7th, the first wave of Japanese aircraft took off from their carriers. The strike force included 353 aircraft. They approached Oahu from the north, using the island's mountains to mask their approach. At 7:48 a.m., the first Japanese planes appeared over Pearl Harbor. The attack caught the American forces completely by surprise. The first bombs fell on Ford Island Naval Air Station at 7:55 a.m. Within minutes, explosions rocked ships and facilities across Pearl Harbor. The news of the attack spread quickly across the United States. It sent shockwaves through the nation. Americans were stunned, then angry. The mood quickly turned to a determination for revenge. President Roosevelt addressed Congress the next day, December 8th. He asked for a declaration of war against Japan. Congress approved it with near unanimity. The U.S. military sprang into action. Salvage operations began immediately at Pearl Harbor. Many of the sunken or damaged ships were eventually repaired and returned to service. The USS Nevada, despite being heavily damaged, was back in action by 1943. It played a crucial role in the D-Day invasion and other operations. The attack united the American people like never before. Volunteerism soared. Young men lined up at recruitment offices to join the military. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers to support the war effort. The entire nation mobilized for what would be a long and costly war. Internationally, the response was swift. On December 8th, the United Kingdom declared war on Japan. Germany and Italy, honoring their alliance with Japan, declared war on the United States on December 11th. The attack on Pearl Harbor dramatically altered the course of World War II. It brought the United States into the conflict as a fully committed combatant. The industrial might and manpower of the United States proved decisive. For Japan, the attack was a tactical success but a strategic failure. They failed to destroy the U.S. aircraft carriers, crucial in the Pacific War. The attack united the American people behind the war effort. The attack on Pearl Harbor opened up a new front in World War II, the Pacific Theater. This vast area of operations stretched from the Aleutian Islands in the north to Australia in the south, and from Burma in the west to the Hawaiian Islands in the east. It would be the scene of some of the war's fiercest and most brutal fighting. Initially, Japan had the upper hand in the Pacific. In the months following Pearl Harbor, they rapidly expanded their empire. They captured Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, and numerous other territories. By mid-1942, Japan controlled a vast area of East and Southeast Asia. They seemed unstoppable. However, the tide began to turn in mid-1942. The Battle of Midway in June was a crucial turning point. U.S. forces sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, dealing a blow from which the Japanese Navy never fully recovered. From then on, the United States and its allies slowly but steadily pushed back against Japanese forces. The Pacific War was characterized by island-hopping campaigns, brutal jungle warfare, and massive naval battles. Places like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa became household names. The attack on Pearl Harbor had profound long-term consequences for both Japan and the United States. For Japan, it led to a devastating defeat in World War II. The country was occupied by Allied forces from 1945 to 1952. Ironically, the U.S. occupation led to a close alliance between the two former enemies. For the United States, Pearl Harbor marked the beginning of its emergence as a global superpower. The U.S. military, which had been relatively small before the war, became the most powerful in the world. Today, Pearl Harbor remains a powerful symbol in American culture and history. The USS Arizona Memorial, built over the sunken battleship, attracts millions of visitors each year. It serves as a somber reminder of the lives lost and the sacrifices made during the attack and the subsequent war. The phrase "Remember Pearl Harbor" became a rallying cry during World War II. It continues to resonate today, often invoked in times of national crisis. The attack has been the subject of numerous books, films, and documentaries. It continues to fascinate historians and the general public alike. Pearl Harbor has also become a symbol of reconciliation. In 2016, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited Pearl Harbor with President Barack Obama. It was the first such visit by a Japanese leader. The gesture mirrored Obama's earlier visit to Hiroshima. These visits symbolized the strong alliance that has developed between the two nations since the war.